of our desires descend, that it makes us to long for our own wretched food, and to be nauseated by the indescribable blessings of heaven. But, as I say, when these aridities proceed from the way of the purgation of sensual desire, although at first the spirit feels no sweetness, for the reasons that we have just given, it feels that it is deriving strength and energy to act from the substance which this inward food gives it, the which food is the beginning of a contemplation that is dark and arid to the senses, which contemplation is secret and hidden from the very person that experiences it, and ordinarily, together with the aridity and emptiness which it causes in the senses, it gives the soul an inclination and desire to be alone and in quietness, without being able to think of any particular thing, or having the desire to do so. If those souls to whom this comes to pass knew how to be quiet at this time, and did not trouble about performing any kind of action, whether inward or outward, nor had any anxiety about doing anything, then they would delicately experience this inward refreshment in that ease and freedom from care. So delicate is this refreshment that ordinarily, if a man have desire or care to experience it, he does not experience it. For as I say, it does its work when the soul is most at ease and freest from care. It is like the air which, if one would close one's hand upon it, escapes. In this sense we may understand that which the spouse said to the bride in the songs, namely, "Withdraw your eyes from me, for they make me to soar aloft." For in such a way does God bring the soul into this state, and by so different a path does he lead it, that if it desires to work with its faculties, it hinders the work which God is doing in it, rather than aids it. Whereas, aforetime, it was quite the contrary. The reason is that, in this state of contemplation, which the soul enters when it forsakes meditation for the state of the proficient, it is God who is now working in the soul. He binds its interior faculties, and does not allow it to cling to the understanding, nor to have delight in the will, nor to reason with the memory. For anything that the soul can do of its own accord at this time serves only, as we have said, to hinder inward peace, and the work which God is accomplishing in the spirit by means of that aridity of sense. And this peace, being spiritual and delicate, performs a work which is quiet and delicate, solitary, productive of peace and satisfaction, and far removed from all those earlier pleasures which were very palpable and sensual. This is the peace which, says David, God speaks in the soul to the end that he may make it spiritual. And this leads us to the third point. The third sign whereby this purgation of sense may be recognized is that the soul can no longer meditate or reflect in the imaginative sphere of sense as it was wont, however much it may of itself endeavor to do so. For God now begins to communicate himself to it, no longer through sense as he did aforetime, by means of reflections which joined and sundered its knowledge, but by pure spirit, into which consecutive reflections do not enter. But he communicates himself to it by an act of simple contemplation, to which neither the exterior nor the interior senses of the lower part of the soul can attain. From this time forward, therefore, imagination and fancy can find no support in any meditation, and can gain no foothold by means thereof. With regard to this third sign, it is to be understood that this embarrassment and dissatisfaction of the faculties do not proceed from indisposition, For when this is the case, and the indisposition, which never lasts for long, comes to an end, the soul is able once again, by taking some trouble about the matter, to do what it did before, and the faculties find their wonted support. But in the purgation of the desire this is not so. When once the soul begins to enter therein, its inability to reflect with the faculties grows ever greater. For although it is true that at first, and with some persons, the process is not as continuous as this, so that occasionally they fail to abandon their pleasures and reflections of sense, for perchance, by reason of their weakness, it was not fitting to wean them from these immediately, yet this inability grows within them more and more, and brings the workings of sense to an end, if indeed they are to make progress. For those who do not walk in the way of contemplation act very differently. For this night of aridities is not usually continuous in their senses. At times they have these aridities, at others they do not. At times they cannot meditate, at others they can. For God sets them in this night only to prove them and to humble them, and to reform their desires, so that they do not go nurturing in themselves a sinful gluttony in spiritual things. He does not set them there in order to lead them in the way of the Spirit, which is this contemplation. For not all those who walk of set purpose in the way of the Spirit are brought by God to contemplation, nor even the half of them. Why, He best knows. And this is why He never completely weans the senses of such persons from the breasts of meditations and reflections, but only for short periods and at certain seasons, as we have said. End of Chapter 9 of Book 1